Greetings, one and all, and welcome to Seven Kinds of Mischief. I'm your host, Stone Loki, and of course, my co-host. He is the Doctor of Disaster and Destruction, the author, Adega Outlaw.
Very good evening.
How are you doing tonight, brother?
Still extremely busy. More busy than last week, and frustrated that I can't bring the whole game to you guys. I don't even have a camera anymore. Everything's packed and moving. I've been on the phone all day. My wife is out of town all week. Just bang, 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 plugging along, trying to get things done. I will tell you a story of something that happened today, but other than that,
Dude,
just hanging in there.
You just reminded me, just the way you were saying everything just now, you reminded me of the automaton video you did. Go to life and seek out this. Oh, I loved it. I fucking loved it.
You can play that anytime you like.
I loved it. Damn it. Oh my God. How did you, when you were doing that? I mean, I can just, you go and search out destruction and death.
Well, I went through it vocally twice, and it was like, no, that didn't sound right. I really have to exaggerate things. You know, it made me appreciate actors that much more.
I loved it. Yeah.
My automaton. Go, my automaton of death.
Yes. Yes.
Play in the blood of humanity.
Yes. That is the shit right there. And we've got a $5 super sticker from Eris of Chaos, who's got a little Yorkie saying bravo, bravo, bravo. Thank you so very much, Eris of Chaos.
No, I showed Loki a little brief of things, really dark and scary stuff that I'm trying to put together of what the world is really about on the financial end of things and the history of some of the people who are in control or try to be controlled, because you can't control everybody and you can't control a free spirit. We will overcome these setbacks by these children that think they can manipulate and play the rest of the world. But I am going in a completely opposite direction since I am unprepared again. And one of the things that you're taught in speech, because I had a lot of different speech classes over the years, that you never apologize. And I apologized 3 times already. So today I was on the phone, and this goes for everybody, because you hear, I was enthralled this morning. Listen to everybody on Loki's show, and enthralled in a tension-grabbing way, not in a I'm happy way. I was quite saddened to hear what happened to Gina Carano. And I have mentioned these things quite a few times to people about, use your voice. Why is it that we have to be contributors to the media that is out there? Why do we have to enjoy what they tell us to enjoy? Why do we have to watch what they tell us to watch? Why do we have to read what they tell us to read? Why do we have to think what they tell us to think? Do you like being told? Do you like being drug around by a nose ring that they strapped on you, and not for any fun whatsoever, but because some people want to guide you in their little paths of manipulation and hurting you like sheep? I don't. Anyway, the point is, I was on, one of the things about moving, you got to move all your utilities, and and don't give me a hard time. It's the only one that I can get to, but I have to go with Spectrum in the town that I'm moving to. And I was talking with the Spectrum guy, and it came up, and he needed my email, and it had my author name on it. And the question came up, and I said, yeah, I wrote a little bit. And he goes, I always thought about writing. And then we started talking, and I said, you thought about it? He says, yeah, it's when I was a kid. I used to draw a lot, and my buddies and I, we'd talk about comics, and gosh, I'm thinking, man, this guy belongs in the fandom. And I said, well, how come you haven't done it? He says, well, I got a wife and kids and this and that. And I'm going, when was it? And I've told you guys this. I said, when was the last time you went to a library? When was the last time you looked in a Barnes & Noble when we were able to? And you saw all the thousands of authors, children, old, young, male, female, all race, creed, colors, subjects from food to how to trim your toenails, voices. All of them are minds with voices. And when you're told to sit down and watch what they want you to watch and listen to what they want you to listen to, it takes away your voice. And the guy thought, huh. I said, yeah, it doesn't matter if it's good or bad. It doesn't matter if you only spend 5 minutes a day on it. After a month, you're going to have an outline for your comic that you had in mind. And he says, well, I thought about this one comic, and I'm not going to tell you his idea because it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And I would be one of his subscribers on his Indiegogo when he sets it up. And he goes, yeah. I said, dude, they made a movie that was worse on similar idea, but yours is far superior. And he goes, really? And I said, start writing, man. Get with the program. And he was so excited that someone gave him a little bit of encouragement, because they weren't telling him to sit down, weren't telling him that you need to be fired because of your opinions, weren't telling him this or that or the other. And he's going to start writing. And I tell the same thing to you all again. It's just a little story that I had today. And everyone, try and make this a daily thing. Even people on the phone who are selling you your internet service. Because if we all do this, it spreads. People are used to being, like Loki said, you put that feed bag on with the straps over your ears and walk in line like a sheep. I want to hear your voices, whether it's through an instrument, whether it's through spoken word, or whether it's through written word, or if you can draw, or if you can build. And think of what we would do with that. When instead of turning on the television to watch this garbage that they say is Star Trek, and you go to your neighbor's house and listen to them play a musical instrument, or you guys go to your local junior college play and pay your $2 and do your social distancing or whatever, and you watch the kids perform, there's a different spirit, a stronger spirit. It's a human spirit. And that's us getting together instead of being divided, stalled in your little feed corner where they can put the strap around your neck and milk you for your cash over and over and over again. Be a good little animal. Not me, not you, and not the guy from Spectrum anymore. So, like I said, I don't have anything other than that tonight. But when I tell you these things, this isn't a prepared speech. This isn't anything at all. This is just me telling you how I feel. And I know most of you out there feel the same way. And I know most of you out there have a talent. And I know the rest of you want to have a talent. And there's no reason why you shouldn't be doing it. And there's no reason why you shouldn't be sharing it. You talk about Rambling Canuck and how he had that little fight with Loki, which was a good thing because it was funner than heck to watch. But you should hear his karaoke. I turn it on every once in a while. People never know I'm there. Never know that I'm practicing a song, because one day I may join them and sing something from David Bowie, or maybe not. But some of these people can sing really well, and some of them can't sing at all. But you know what? I love it because they're doing it, and it's community, and it's union, and it's better than the darkness that's out there that I've been sharing with you. We are light. We need to make sure that people know it and never let it out. Never put that light out. That is me for the day.
Thank you. And just kind of follow up before I read y'all this, just to kind of follow up on what Adega said. I got told in grade school that I needed to sit down and be more like the other children. I got told that I was behind in everything I did, that I wasn't keeping up with the rest of the class, that I wasn't smart as everybody else. And I had one teacher, one single teacher that knew better because I knew everything. Everything that he came up with, he was a history teacher. His name was Mr. Smith. And everything that he could possibly bring up to stump us, to question us, to drive us, I knew the answer to. And he knew something that the other teachers didn't. And I kept getting told by my mother that I needed to sit down and be quiet and be more like the other kids. I kept getting told by my teachers that I needed to sit down, be quiet, and be like the other little kids. The problem was that I was so far ahead of them that I was bored. I should have been 2 grades in front of them, not in the grade that I was in. I was bored, and I didn't really have anything to do because I knew what they were teaching already.
Just like my brother that passed away. Same thing.
I could have conformed. And that's what they want you to do today. They want you to conform. They want you to follow in line. They want you, like Adega said, they want you to put the feed bag over your head and follow that line and do exactly what they tell you to do. Wear what they want you to wear. Dress in the clothes that they want to provide for you. Buy the things they want to sell you. It's your choice or not. Either you can conform or not. That is completely and totally up to you. I will not, and I will stand up and I will have my voice heard and I will speak my mind. They can drive me off of YouTube. They can drive me off of Patreon. They can drive me off of Discord. I will keep coming back and I will keep raising my voice to be heard because I am not afraid to stand up and say, I am not going to conform to the things you want me to conform to. I am going to speak my mind. I am going to be honest. I'm going to lay out facts, not fiction.
Think about it. All of you, I guarantee almost every single one of you has a pair of jeans. Why do you wear jeans? Because that's what they offered you. You know, it used to be, you've seen me on some of the older streams, and I still do it, but not as often. You'd see me wearing vests or different sweaters. And the reason being is because they were handmade by somebody. They weren't mass produced by the companies that say, this is what's in fashion. Look how cool you will be, just like everybody else. Give us your money for this. Instead of going to your neighbor who is an excellent seamstress or seamster and make something that fits you perfectly, like some of my shirts. Hand sewn and lasts 20 years longer than the jeans that wear out in the knees after 3 years. You only do it because they tell you that's what's appropriate. That's what you need to wear. Don't be sheep.
Nope. Don't be sheep or sheeple or whatever you want to call it today. Completely agree. So the story I've got for you guys tonight is called Black Ibis. And you can find this story over on Creepypasta. It was put up February 7th, 2021. So it was just 4 days ago. I've been a hunter since a very young age, a wanderer of the silent woods, a stalker of the croaking marshes, a drifter of the sighing deserts. My father was a hunter, as was his father. I would say it runs in our blood, it runs in our family, but I think it runs through all of us. Some have just let it crawl into the darkest corners of themselves, where it sits and longs for the feeling of dirt and wind and snow. It's the primal part of us that exists despite the 9-to-5 slog, the grocery stores we patronize, and the concrete forests we call home. We make enough money to provide for our family and to send the kids to football practice. But something Something has been lost. We long for a struggle that tests our fortitude, that tests our resolve. The rewards of the endeavor are redemptive. Yet, like a rat in a trap, people don't know how to release themselves and be truly free. The shackles of modern living are strong, but there is a key. Stepping outside the safety, the security we understand, and challenging the natural world that we lost acquaintance to so long ago. I am grateful for my father who introduced me to the harsh beauty of this world. It made me strong, self-reliant, liberated, enlightened. I remember walking through the cornfields of South Dakota with him, dry corn stalks whipping across my face, squinting against the lashing onslaught. We were hunting pheasants, and I wasn't old enough to hunt. I could barely see over the tops of the stalks. The hunters walked 10 yards apart down the corn rows, pushing the pheasant out in front of them. The bitter wind howled in an attempt to mask the explosion of wings, and the pheasant took flight. They erupted seemingly from nowhere. It was always in that moment of flight, when they were the backlit against the feeble sun, where everything ceased to exist. Life's greatest and most troubling questions were brushed from my mind as the pheasant burst forth from the earth. The male streaming tail feathers and colorful plumes popped in contrast to the gray sky. I swear I could even see the yellow iris and pupil that seemed fixed on me alone. If the call of rooster from a nearby hunter didn't slam me back to the earth, the crack of the shotgun would. Another moment of time as frozen as the landscape around me. The bird's upward momentum halted, and it fell. The corn stalks were claiming what they had lost to the sky. My brain once again registered my surroundings, and I cheered with those around me. And the hunter picked up a bird. For one last moment, the yellow iris stared at me before disappearing into a game bag taken from the land. I learned a lot from my father about hunting. He taught me about animal behavior, tracking, the weather, terrain. The more you understand an animal, the more successful the hunt. In Southern California, we hunted quail in cold woods where we yearned for the sun to break over the tops of mountains that were black like pitch. As we walked through the dry grass, I was self-conscious of the crunch of vegetation under my feet and the snap of branches that cut through the air. The air itself seemed disapproving of the blundering noise we created. As we walked, we would occasionally stop and listen for their distinctive call that would guide us to them. Silence was their savior, and their calls, they were a beacon to us all. We would share a glance and eagerly quicken our pace to catch our quarry, and just when we expected them to be, they materialized, their camouflage so complex that it was as if the ground itself was fragmenting and scattering in every direction. As we pursued them, my father would hold out a hand and I would stop. The silence so complete that I would breathe through my mouth to avoid the chill air whistling through my nostrils. My heart skipped when a quail flew from a brush and beeline for safety. And as I struggled with my cold wooden thumb to get my safety off, my father had dropped the quail with a single shot. Silence, punctuated by the shotgun blast, was replaced by the ringing in my ears. As he retrieved the bird, I asked him what he had stopped me for. He said that the silence and unknown bring more fear than what is seen and heard. The brain can process the direction to flee when danger presents itself, but when the danger is unseen and unheard, it creates a panic. This panic drives the bird to flight when its camouflage would easily conceal its presence. As hunters, we are always trying to exploit a weakness in our prey, leveraging their natural instincts, such as the drive to eat, drink, and mate, to our advantage. When hunting predators, such as coyotes, the sound of a dying rabbit playing over a speaker, it was irresistible to them. To add to the illusion, we would place a mechanical box in the middle of a field with a wire running from it to a fury of a tail. The mechanical box had a motor that would whip the wire from side to side, giving the appearance that a panicked, furry creature was injured and thrashing. The screams and thrashing brought out a compulsion that the coyote could not suppress. Coyotes would come running towards the decoy at a dead sprint, and by the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. The 223 varmint round put them down, and quick. We used calls for other animals too, from the massive moose that glided through the snow and trees like race to the ducks that dove from the sky to land on misty ponds. But calling isn't as easy as blowing on an instrument. There is technique required, utilizing a specific pitch, pattern, or sound in order to create the desired effect. Every call meant something different, from feeding, mating, fighting, and warning. If the wrong call was used at the wrong time or with an improper technique, it would spook the prey. There are many times where I attempted to call an animal only to have it turn tail and flee in the opposite direction. An effective call could mean the difference between a success or an unsuccessful hunt. Every game animal required a different set of skills and techniques in order to successfully hunt them down. Part of the thrill of hunting is becoming a master of every style and the continual process of self-improvement. What I hunt varies from year to year. It all depends on how busy I am during the season. I can sometimes travel out of state, but often due to work, I stay local and hunt within a few hours of my house. It was early on in the duck season, and I got to a local honey hole that many people were not aware of. I rarely saw any other hunters in this area, so it was a good opportunity for me to walk through the marsh and by the river in silence and solitude. On this particular morning, though, I pulled up to the dirt patch on the side of the road where I parked my truck and shut off the engine. I got out and was greeted by a chill, moist in the air. I was within a couple of miles of the ocean, so the air was always somewhat damp and salty. River and marsh were briny, and the level of water was impacted by the tides. I shut the door, leaving the warm truck cab behind me, started to walk down the dirt path that paralleled the marsh and river. I enjoyed the walk. Even in the off-season, I would come here and walk to enjoy the cool air. The smell of salt, the cry of local fauna, the rising of the sun that brought the premise of a new day. Even on a slow hunting day, there was still a lot to enjoy. There was a kingfisher that would perch high in the trees, his bright blue body like an orb of water pulled from the river, purified of mud and silt. The sentry scanned the water with his keen eyesight. Then, when he spotted his prey, he dove from the tree, tucking his wings to his side as he pierced the surface of the water. He would emerge with a sprinkling of water that was caught by the weak dam light. Shimmering like the scattered drops of water was the small fish that was speared upon his pointed beak. He would return to his branch to consume his meal. There were osprey that drove for fish in the river. Gulls and cormorants began their exodus from the coast to inland waters to feed. Vultures like torn black rags circled above. I even saw a seal swimming down the river, presumably heading back out to sea. A stoic great blue heron stood in the middle of the river, absolutely motionless. The slender bird deftly maneuvered his way through the muck and reeds with his skeletal legs, head bobbing and cocked to gaze into the water. I observed the lord of the river, his stature creating a commanding presence as I approached. The stilt walker clumsily took to the air with a croak that belied his majesty. I continued my walk. I looked down at my gun, 12 gauge over Browning. No polymer like the newer shotguns, just wooden metal with intricate engravings in the metal. I broke open the barrel and inserted 2 shells, snapping it shut. The sky was lightening and gazed downriver. It's hard to tell due to the light, but there seemed to be some ducks out on the water about 100 yards from me. I crouched down and slowly moved towards the bobbing black blobs on the surface of the river. I used the bushes to my advantage as I stalked closer. When I thought I was close enough, I burst from the bushes and my quarry took flight. Quick evaluation of the flight patterns and body structure told me it was a duck. I raised my firearm, looked down the length of the barrel, and led the flying bird with the bead. I made sure to smoothly track the bird, took a deep breath, let it out, and squeezed the trigger. It continued to fall through after the shot. The duck's wings promptly folded and plummeted into the water. I ejected the spent shell, and gun smoke filled the air and my nostrils. I was wearing chest-high waders so that I could remain dry while retrieving the ducks from the water. The first couple of feet were always the worst. The mud would sink me into the knees for the first few steps, threatening to apprehend me. But once in the deeper water, the river bottom became firm. I reached my prize and picked it up from the water. It's one of the most beautiful ducks I'd ever seen. The majority of the front of his body and chest were covered in white plume. It had a shiny black stripe that started at the base of its neck and traveled to the tip of its tail. But what was most beautiful was its head. Towards the top of its head was a white spot like a cotton ball. I thought the area of the head surrounding the white spot was black, but upon further inspection, I realized that as the rising sun struck the feathers, they turned an iridescent purple and green. I pondered the implications of this color scheme and wondered about its evolutionary benefit. In the continual survival and propagation of a species. But then I thought, does it really matter? Reducing the beauty of this creature to blind evolution seemed to be a disservice. It was a masterpiece that could not be taken for granted. I decided to call it early and place the warm body inside my vest as I made the walk back to my truck. I got home 20 minutes later, and my grandpa greeted me as I came through the front door. My grandfather had been a hunter too, that is, until he had a stroke 15 years ago. He had a hard time getting around, and so he'd been giving away his hunting rifles and shotguns over the years. He was 80 now. When it rains, it pours. He had many health issues. He had moved back with my parents so that they could help take care of him, as it became increasingly more difficult for him to take care of himself. But despite his circumstances in life, he was a man of faith, and I admired him so much for that. Attempted to live with the same faith that brought him peace and joy even as his health faded. He saw everything as a blessing, even the tragedies. He saw beauty everywhere. That's when he noticed the duck. He couldn't see very well, so he asked me to bring it closer to him. I approached his wheelchair and held the duck up for him to see. He peered through his enormously thick glasses at it and stared for a moment. Then he looked up at me and said it was the most beautiful black and white duck he had ever seen. He told me I should take the duck to a taxidermist to immortalize its beauty. I told him that was the idea. He passed away 2 weeks later. While his death was tragic, we were able to reflect on our fond memories of him, especially the last couple of months that he was with us. Everyone said what needed to be said. He made amends. He found peace. And he saw all the beauty that there is in life. Winter's grasp was creeping across the land, and for me, that meant the hunting season was almost over. Thought I would get my mind off of things and go for an impromptu hunt. So I drove out in the desert. I woke up early around 4:30 a.m. on a Saturday morning and started my 2-hour drive towards Bakersfield. I loved early morning drives by myself. I would usually throw on a podcast, listen to some 70s rock, and cruise in the slow lane. Always loved the journey. Started to head down the winding grade. In another hour, I was in Bakersfield as the horizon turned to dusky blue. I turned off the highway and drove through the town until the buildings became fewer and agricultural fields dominated the land. There were groves of almond trees in this area, and Dove typically used these fields as flyways. Even before I made it to my destination, I saw the flighty flight pattern of mourning doves, their dark silhouettes becoming visible. I reached the end of the dirt road and slowly came to a stop. I turned off the engine and the radio followed. I got out and for a few moments just stood and admired the stillness. Soft birdsong came from the grove of trees. The dusty air stank of agriculture, making me realize how far I was from home. I decided to set my chair up on the edge of the tree line with my cooler of water, Gatorade, and a gas station cold cut. Now all I had to do was take it in and relax. I would also be ready to draw on the drop of a hat if a dove flew by. I settled into a more comfortable position in my chair and watched the skies for some time. The next moment, I awoke with a start. The shotgun in my lap fumbled and I almost pitched forward out of the folding chair. I let out a strangled yell at the sudden awakening when I hadn't even realized that I'd fallen asleep. I took a deep breath and mentally shook it off as my heart rate lowered and my breathing returned to normal. I looked around me, still no dove. For that matter, nothing was moving. The soft birdsong I heard earlier had ceased completely. For a moment, I thought the peace had been shattered by my violent awakening. That's why the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. But something else persisted. The adrenaline spike should have ebbed by now. But something Something lingered. Gut instincts are hard to ignore when you're alone in the woods. I tried to focus my attention on my senses. I realized that I'd been straining to hear. At first, I couldn't tell whether I was listening for anything at all or whether I was listening for something. And that is when I heard it. Well, I couldn't tell what it was yet, but it was certainly a sound. It snaked its way through the grove of trees, slithering across the leaf litter. Despite the now relatively warm air, a chill started up my right ear and traveled down my neck and into my lower back, like someone had whispered in my ear in the dead of midnight. I looked in the direction that the sound had come from. The tree stood before me. I felt just as rooted as they were. Something kept me from moving forward. My eyes remained fixed on the trees. Eyes narrowing. I held my breath. Standing on the precipice without realizing it, I had taken my first step forward. I moved forward into the silent trees, searching for the source of the sound. I'd been walking for several minutes. The silence was not the type that I sought. The ambient noise I had previously taken for granted was now gone, absent. No bird song, no drone of insects, nothing. Only sound came from me wading through the loam and leaves. But the sound was muffled, suppressed, the same way that snow absorbs sound and intensifies silence. These trees were suffocating. I got the prickling feeling on the back of my neck again. I whipped around to look over my shoulder back the way I had come. Nothing. As I turned back, I thought I saw movement out of the corner of my eye, and I spun my head around to see nothing but bemused trees. I looked down at the ground, trying to center myself. I gripped my shotgun tighter and managed to grin grimly. I really had nothing to worry about. I almost laughed. There wasn't much that would be able to withstand 2 shotgun blasts, even if it was just birdshot. I looked up again and kept walking. I realized the trees were granting a respite. They were beginning to thin. I felt my tension melt. Then, through the top of the trees, I saw a flock of birds, the first living thing I'd seen since I had arrived. I only caught a quick glimpse of them, but I wasn't sure that I recognized the species. Before I could stop myself, I quickened my pace to follow their progress through the trees. Something in the back of my mind whispered to stop, but I only increased my pace, stumbling over roots and rocks, and I tried to keep the birds in sight. I was now running, and I couldn't pull my gaze away. The trees rushed by me, and while my mind was now screaming to slow down, look, listen, I was hurtling forward in my rabid pursuit. Suddenly, I burst through the edge of the trees and found myself in a clearing. I frantically searched the sky, and I saw them. I realized what they were. It was a flock of black ibis. I stared in stunned silence. They were circling the clearing, and there were hundreds of them. The sight was overwhelming. They beat their wings frantically like their lives depended on it. Their beaks were agape and their throats vibrated at an alarming rate. No other sound filled the clearing except for the beating of their wings. Normally, I would admire animals in their natural habitat, but something about this was wrong. I didn't know what a flock of black ibis could possibly be doing in Bakersfield. Ibis were typically marsh or wading birds and could be found near wetlands. Bakersfield was a damn desert. If it weren't for the irrigation that supported agriculture, something about them wasn't right. They were heralds of dread. I felt as if I was about to completely lose my nerve as I stared up at the circling flock, ceaselessly flapping. That's when I heard it. And I knew that it was the sound that had awoken me on the edge of the tree line. It was a female voice. A soft, silky, smooth, sensual voice. It creeped across the clearing, coming from the other side. It came in waves, breaking and retreating, crashing and hissing, ebbing and flowing. I couldn't understand what was being said, but I knew what it meant. The harder I tried to make out the words, the more I let go of the world around me. All that mattered now was that voice. It would ebb, and with each flow, I was drawn closer. My mind was adrift, and I let it float in warm bliss, floating on a clear, warm sea, waves lapping my body and lulling me into a state of peace, basking in a green meadow with grass that caressed my face. I was halfway across the clearing, following that voice. That's when she appeared from behind a tree. She was a tall woman with milky sin, her voice like honey. She had thick black hair that billowed despite the lack of wind. She wore a white dress that flowed down to her bare feet. Her body swayed and undulated just like the ebb and flow of her voice. I was mesmerized. I vaguely realized that my gun, it was back on the other side of the clearing. Her soothing words stopped, as did I, and we both stood staring at each other across the space left between us as the ibis circled like fabric of the night stitched to the sky. There was a pause, a serene moment. She was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. She smiled at me with warmth that I felt in my chest, and it radiated the rest of my body. Tears filled my eyes as I stared at this radiant woman as the ibis continued their flight. My peace was shattered with the crack of a bone. My eyes widened as the woman's head inclined with a snap, and her mouth split in a smile that stretched from ear to bloody ear. Bones cracked in her fingers and toes as her hands and feet lengthened. Her nails grew into thick, darkened claws. I was frozen. Her legs lengthened, spindly stilts with backwards-facing knees, and her arms elongated to her knees. Her previously smooth black hair became matted, dead black strands. Her spine popped and protruded through her upper back, forcing her upper body to bend until she was on all fours. Her previously soothing voice was replaced by something that was discordant, high and low pitched at the same time, seemingly moaning, screaming, and growling all at the same time. My will left me. The creature continued its unsettling vocalization. The ground around it was torn as soil and grass flew from its fitful transformation. With a final moan, it finally stopped moving and looked up at me with dark eyes peering through that matted hair. It grinned. At that moment, it lunged as the ibis squawked above me. Torn from my daze, I dove to the side, and as soon as I hit the ground, I was up and running. Sprinting in the opposite direction, I frantically looked for the shotgun as ibis scattered in every direction, shrieking and flapping. There, I saw it through the flapping of black wings. It was there, in the grass, but I had no time to spare. She was unleashing her unearthly call behind me. I sprinted towards the gun and dove toward it as the creature simultaneously leapt towards me, but sailed overhead as I dove under it. I grabbed the shotgun and took off running through the trees with the creature close behind me. My chest was burning and my breath came in sobs. The creature sounded triumphant as it screamed to the sky as I ran. I opened the barrels and swore when I realized that there were no shells in the barrels and the ones I had with me had been lost during the chaos. I threw the gun away and sprinted further into the trees. I tried to put as many trees between myself and the creature as possible. To break its line of sight, its calls became fainter as I found a tree to hide behind and catch my breath. I sat there breathing heavily, and suddenly it dawned on me with a sinking dread. I was the prey. I felt cold sweat as I heard its distant vocalization. Prey behavior. That is what was going to save my life. All my knowledge was going to determine my fate. Refocusing, I looked behind me and saw that my trail through the trees was pretty clear. I swore silently and saw movement behind the trees. A glint of black eyes, pallid skin, a stretched smile ripped my gaze away and found the nearest tree. Climbing into it and tearing the skin on my hands as I climbed, I reached the top of the tree. Huddling in the foliage, I had to cover my mouth to stifle the sobs and gasps for air. A couple of minutes passed in silence. Suddenly, I looked up into the branches and saw a dove. First one that I had seen since this morning. It was huddled as close as it could get to the trunk of the tree, and its unblinking eyes were fixed somewhere in the direction from which I had come. I stared at it with dawning realization. I hadn't seen this dove, or any other for that matter, as I walked through the trees until I came across the ibis. If I couldn't see the birds in the trees, then maybe this thing wouldn't see me. I grasped the trunk and held my breath. That's when I heard it, shuffling and dragging through the dead leaves and black hair littered the filth. A low, warbling hum was emanating from the creature. It resonated in my chest, and I felt that this low-frequency sound was going to expose me. The creature continued disjointly ambling with its head swaying back and forth, searching. I didn't know how much longer I could hold on. Tears were streaming down my face, and it was everything I could do to stop myself from crying out and gasping for air. The creature continued this sound and turned its head. It was angled away from me, listening. I saw the corner of its mouth rise in another horrifying grin. It moved out of sight, and then there was silence. That same awful, deathly silence. Creatures nowhere to be seen. I remember the quail in those cold woods so many years ago. Their panic was their downfall. But the silence was pressing in. I felt the urge to jump, to flee. Just as I thought I was going to lose my composure and scream, a dove burst from a tree. Darting and weaving through the trees, the creature vocalized this distorted call, and it galloped after the panicked bird. After the footfalls had faded to silence, I let out a gasp and gulped in air as I shakily wiped the sweat from my face. I began my descent through the branches and looked one more time up at the trembling dove perched in the tree. I broke my gaze and began my sprint through the trees. Silence, but for my racing footsteps through the leaves. The creature was somewhere in those rows of trees waiting. Then I heard it again. That cry. I picked up my pace as I saw something pale looping through the trees like a dog running through tall grass. The sight was enough to break me, but adrenaline pushed my body to move as fast as it could. I saw a flash of reflected sunlight through the trees. It was the reflection of a pond. I didn't know what else to do. I ran straight for the pond, noticing the reeds and heavy brush that sprouted up from the water. I grabbed a handful of brush and covered my tracks the best that I could. Shakily brushing the ground, I slipped into the cold water and it clawed at my chest as I gasped. I embedded myself in the thick reeds and sat still, already shivering from the fear and the penetrating cold. The galloping footsteps came closer and the creature appeared at the edge of the pond. It was low to the ground, crawling along the bank. I looked down at my shaking hands and my heart dropped blood. I was bleeding from the tree that I had climbed. Without moving my body, my eyes tracked the creature's movement. It was staring at something on the ground. As I watched in repulsion, a thick, grotesque tongue emerged from its maw, and it dragged it across the ground. I closed my eyes and huddled into the reeds. Did it know where I was? Was it toying with me? I opened my eyes, and the creature was gone. For the first time, I looked around. Through a gap in the trees, I could see my truck. I wanted to make a break for it, but I had no idea where the creature was. That's when I heard the rustling in the treetops. Between the dark foliage, I could see glimpses of that skin like sour milk. It was stalking me. It knew I was close. The foliage rustled once more, and then it was still. Minutes passed, and then an hour. The cold water was beginning to take its toll. My muscles ached, and I felt drained. There was no denying my situation. The creature knew I was close. It was only a matter of time before it flushed me from hiding. Then I heard the voice. Don't go, my love. I want you. I need you. We could be together forever. I saw a glitter of black eyes, like chiseled flint. I clutched my fist and looked towards my truck. If I was going to run, it was going to be on my terms, not when that thing found me. Then I heard another voice, a male. Hey, is someone out there? I saw your truck. I jumped with a start, and before I could stop myself, I broke for the bank and yelled, yes, I'm here, and I cut myself short as I realized my mistake. The creature leapt silently from a tree and stood at its full, formidable height. I backed away slowly, shaking at the nightmare that stood before me. Without taking its eyes off me, it began to bob and jerk in a mechanical motion. It was moving closer to me, all the while swaying, rolling, leaping, and bobbing. I was transfixed by its unnatural movements, and I felt like I could neither bite or run. My limbs refused to obey as my mind floundered with thoughts, none of which I could focus on. It got closer, still grinning at me with a mouth that seemed to be nothing but sharpened teeth jutting out from stretched lips. It crouched within an arm length of me and extended its face towards me from its crouched position. It inhaled deeply through its nostrils and shook slightly as it exhaled with an excited whimper. The eyes rolling back in its head with unrestrained glee. The massive tongue flopped from its mouth and it grabbed my bleeding hand with a vice-like grip. I fell to my knees as its grip forced me to the ground, the tongue wrapped around my hand, slurping and lapping at the wound. I couldn't avert my horrified eyes as its breathing grew quicker and heavier. The tongue retracted back almost unwillingly, and it refocused on me. Flung me into the pond with contempt, and I hit the water. Before I could orient myself, it was on me, and I flailed trying to reach the surface. I opened my eyes underwater and came face to face with it inches away. Its hair flowed like a billowing dark cloud. It screamed in my face, and bubbles obscured my vision. With panic filling me, I lashed out and caught it in the stomach with one of my flailing feet, pushed it away. I realized the moment to push it off from the ground and broke the surface with a gasp. I desperately swam for shore, not looking back to see if it was following. I clambered on the slick bank and then felt that iron grip clasp my ankle. I looked back and saw its head half submerged in water and black hair spread across its face. The grip clamped harder and blood mixed with the mud and water as claws sank into my foot. I screamed and blindly lashed out with my free leg trying to dislodge it. It only dug deeper, and I screamed. One of my kicks landed and it loosened its grip enough for me to make it into the muddy bank, and slipping and sliding, I made a hobbled sprint for the truck. I gritted my teeth and broke through the tree line. I reached the truck door and ripped it open as I clambered inside. I slammed the door shut just as a creature burst forth from the trees, lopping towards me. I turned the engine over and, putting the truck in first, dropped the clutch as I shot forward with dust billowing up behind me. It kept pace, lashing out its long arms against the truck until I punched the truck into second gear and sped away, leaving it behind in the dust. As the dust obscured the creature, I saw the silhouette change to that of a woman. She didn't move as I lost sight of her in the rearview, now going over 60 down that dirt road. After I put a few miles between us, I skidded to a halt, not even bothering to engage the clutch, killing the engine and bringing it to a halt. A mixture of relief, dread, and fear washed over me, and my head hit the steering wheel as I sobbed. I couldn't process the events, and I could do nothing but weep. I didn't try to understand or make sense of it. I let it wash over me. I sat stunned and shaking as my brain finally realized that I was safe. I looked up towards the horizon with shaky breath. I started the truck, made the journey home, leaving the danger behind, but not the horror that I had experienced. I don't hunt anymore. Joy and peace I experienced from being in nature was extinguished that day. My pride I once found in embracing myself against the brutality of the world was dashed and irreclaimable. That part of me was beaten into submission, left to lie in a dark corner of my soul, never again to see the light of day. The beauty I once found, now gone by the monstrosity that lurked in the trees. Everything I thought I knew about the world had been flipped upside down until I didn't know what to believe. I wrestled with the existence of that creature. I couldn't believe that such a creature could be created by the same thing that created that black and white duck. The contradiction drove me to madness. I was looking at it all wrong. It was always there. I just didn't realize it. Nothing had changed. These circumstances didn't change the way the world worked, the brutality of it. I was a monster. I always had been. But now I knew. I wasn't the only monster that walked the earth.
Nice.
Thank you. And that was written by Corey Severson. That story is over on Creepypasta, and give me just a second. It is called Black Ibis. So, and it was posted February 7th, 2021.
I got more entertainment out of that than I have out of TV the past year.
Thank you.
No, seriously. We got a great author who wrote that story, thought it up, who isn't on TV, and we have your great voice and ability to read, and I was mesmerized, seeing in my mind that creature with its tongue lashing out of the lake, and the hair floating over its eyes, and just, it was awesome.
So you see it too. See, I
Oh
see.
yeah.
I know people that don't see it. They read it and they just read it. They see the words, they see the book, and that's all they see. And I don't know. I couldn't read a book like that.
No, that's the
I
thing
see
that
it
I
all.
like about stories is especially ones that you hear instead of see. You're taken places where no camera can show you. That was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for hanging out with us. Thank you for talking about what happened this morning, what you were thinking about. Not sitting on the sidelines, writing, doing what you have done. Standing up and saying, no, you know what? I'm not going to just settle for this shit Hollywood's giving me. I'm going to do my own thing.
Well, it's not just doing my own thing as well. It's enjoying what other people who aren't part of the main do. Like here. That's the whole point. Spend $10 a month to see Disney make something of Star Wars, or listen to this. I'm here listening to this.
Oh yes. And guys, we will be back next week. I know Adega is working on something really cool. I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to talk about it next week. And I will find us something. I only read through those once, and usually if I get a good vibe with something, I'll skim. So I don't even like read the whole thing. I'll skim through it, make sure it's something that I want to read to y'all, and then read it, because I like being surprised too, believe it or not. It's funner to me if I'm surprised too. So we will catch you guys back next week. Thank you so very much. We're going to talk about Steven Spielberg tomorrow morning. And I have got a list of stuff that we are going to be doing this month. We've got a watch party coming up. We have got some member streams coming up. So I will have a full list of
road trip
that we are waiting on. Me and Mexican Iron Man we do not know when that is going to happen, but it probably is going to be next month. I'm guessing.
Sorry, I should be settled and everything next month, so be a little bit more contributive once everything settles down over here.
Oh, and Mexican Iron Man. Oh, cancel Spielberg. Somebody doesn't like Steven Spielberg. Have a great night, y'all. We'll see you in the morning.
These videos are tremendous. Like, comment, and subscribe, and hammer that notification bell.